When interacting with Americans online, it immediately becomes abundantly clear that they all suffer from a chronic disease called not being able to shut the fuck up about their politics. Whenever I open Reddit, it's immediately Democrats this, Republicans that. You have absolute morons on one side screeching and seething whenever the bad orange man takes a dump, and people equally as retarded claiming that the orange man literally can't do anything wrong and it was sent by Jesus himself to save America from a woke cabal of lizard people. Anyway, one thing that often comes up is that the current political landscape, with all the scandals, lawsuits and just general idiocy, is completely unprecedented. Well, that's just plain wrong. Let's talk about some early US presidential shenanigans. Starting off with Mr. Dollar himself, George, District of Columbia, Washington. Many stories about Washington were about his supposed honesty. You probably know the story about a young George cutting down a cherry tree and admitting to his mom that he did it. Which, now that I think of it, is kind of a weird story. I mean, why the fuck would I care if you're honest? You ruined my fucking front yard. It's not the lie that's the problem, it's the property damage. Anyway, in reality George wasn't as honest as you'd think. Apart from writing love letters to several women while he was married, he'd also likely fathered a boy with one of his slaves. Yep, not a great look. Moving on, John Quincy Adams was the first president to be interviewed by a woman. That in and of itself isn't really a crazy story. What's crazy is the way this interview took place. So what happened was that Adams was taking his daily bath in the Potomac River when a woman named Anne Royal grabbed all of his clothes and only gave him back after she interviewed him. So, Mr. President, is it always that short? It's the water, now give me my clothes back. Speaking of the cold, President William Henry Harrison held an inaugural address that was so long he caught pneumonia and died exactly 1 month later, making him the first president to die in office. Not the last though. So you might think Mr. Orange Man is a controversial figure. Well, he's got nothing on the next guy, Andrew Jackson. Why that guy is still on the $20 bill is a mystery to me. This man honestly deserves a video all to himself, because you won't believe how much tomfoolery and genocide this man did. First of all, Old Hickory had an incredibly short temper and an enormous ego. One day, he and some guy named Charles Dickinson, whom I can only assume is the Timu version of Charles Dickens, got into an argument after Charles did the 1800s equivalent of calling Andrew's wife a whore. This then escalated further when Charles accused Andrew of cheating in a horse racing bet. So, how do you think these two gentlemen resolved the situation? Did they A. get a beer together and talk it out? B. get into a fight? Or C. that they almost immediately grabbed their guns and dueled it out, with Andrew missing his shot and getting shot in his chest in return, after which he did the very ungentlemanly and frowned upon thing of shooting again, splattering Charles's brain matter all over the place as Charles looked at him with one final look of surprise before his soul would go on to another plane, and Andrew had forever lived with the fact that he, with his own hands, killed a man, snuffed him out of existence, depriving him of all the joys and sorrows that life might have had in store for him. With a scar on his chest and a chronic pain, he would feel for the rest of his life being a painful reminder of the mistakes he made. Painful reminder that you could never ask Charles for forgiveness for what he did. Or D, the exact same thing as C, but with the added fact that Andrew Jackson was an absolute fucking psychopath, incapable of feeling any remorse whatsoever. Now Charles might be the only man Jackson actually killed himself, but that doesn't mean he didn't get close some other time. It's the year 1835 and a mentally unstable, unemployed and heavily armed house painter named Richard Lawrence tried to do the nation a favour by finishing the jobs Charles Dickinson couldn't. When he tried to ambush Jackson at the Capitol, his gun misfired. So you know how in dangerous situations it's fight or flight. Well, Jackson chose fight. He ran towards Richard and started savagely beating him with a cane to within an inch of his life, with bystanders having to protect Richard from the clobbering he was getting from Andrew. And even in death, Andrew was a menace. His pet parrot had to be removed from his own funeral because it just wouldn't stop shouting profanities during the service. Dearly beloved, we have gathered here today. What? I'm gonna say the N-word. This next fact isn't all that scandalous or crazy, more of a funny anecdote. Martin Van Buren popularized the term OK. The word OK, we now know, is an abbreviation of the term all correct, which at the time was rich people's slang for good. And Van Buren, ever the champion of equality, unless you're black, wanted to popularize the term among the dirty stinking masses, leading to his 1840 re-election campaign slogan being Martin Van Buren is okay, which is just adorably mild. Anyway, what did we learn today? Nothing. Good. See you later.